Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Scottish Open Data Dive Show. Per usual on a Monday night, we have the forecast. Our first look at the forecast for this week. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to take a deep statistical dive into the Renaissance Club, see how it has played the first 3 years of the DP World Tour and PGA Tour Alliance, see how the course is played, the metrics and statistics that seem to be rewarded around Renaissance, the players in the field this week who benefit most from those metrics and statistics, and at the end of the show I'll show you a little bit of research, although I didn't post anything to social media. So we have a lot to get into. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where, as I just alluded to, normally I post research regarding some course information for the tournament of that week, some patterns that previous winners share, players in the field that also share those patterns. Didn't do anything for the Scottish Open since there's only 3 years of data to look at, so not a whole lot of patterns have been developed yet. And then I might be able to, or actually no, I apologize, I won't be able to do anything for the ISCO either, because it is a brand new course. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the players I'm wagering and the players I'm using most often in my lineups, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I can't recommend it enough. By subscribing to that article, you're going to be able to get his deluxe version, which comes out on Wednesday, which has his favorite plays, values, and his projected ownerships. So you really are missing out if you aren't able to catch, or if you aren't able to subscribe to that article. So make sure you're doing that, and follow him over on social media, because that is where we place our detailed write-ups for the 2025 Picks Challenge that resumes this week after his week off of vacation for the 4th last week. So make sure you are following him over on social media. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. I see a couple of you in there already. I'll get to you momentarily, but chat's open. I want to hear from you all. Again, any success you had at the John Deere, please be sure to put that into chat or into the comments. I would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. Hopefully you followed in my footsteps with a big week at the John Deere. And then moving forward to the Scottish, who are you targeting? Who are you staying away from? How do you think the Renaissance Club plays? Do you think it's a good warm-up essentially for the Open Championship? So anything and everything Scottish Open, feel free to put your thoughts and opinions in the chat. And if you aren't able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. Well, we have a lot to get into, so let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 Scottish Open. And we're going to start, as we customarily do on a Monday night, with the first look at the forecast for the week. We are in North Berwick, Scotland, right on the coast, in the northeastern part of Scotland, I should say, or I guess, or maybe it's technically the southeastern part of Scotland, northeastern part of England. Good evening, retail. Thanks for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Hopefully you had a good John Deere. Marco Pingue, Daniel Brown, when you get free time, is Harris English a good scrambler for links? We'll get into all that, but I did say this last night, and it's worth reiterating. Hey, good evening, Rose. Thanks for jumping in chat. It's good to see you as well. Thanks for the well wishes. Yes, I've been back for about a month now, due to all the family issues that were going on. Admittedly, the U.S. Open, not very good. The Travelers was really, really bad. And then the Rocket Mortgage was kind of okay. And then I had a huge week, a blistering week last week at the John Deere. I cashed 76% of the lineups that I played last week, including the mad scientist play being Brian Campbell. So I'm not I'm not right all the time by any means. I will not even pretend to do that. But last week was a very good week, and we're going to try and continue that momentum for 2 straight double tournament weeks. First being, of course, this week, the Scottish Open and the ISCO. ISCO being in my backyard, essentially, in Louisville, Kentucky. I live in a suburb of Louisville, Kentucky, so that'll be quite interesting. But to get back to your point, retail, I mentioned this last night, and it's worth repeating, that I only collect statistics from the PGA Tour. So these DP World Tour players, with the exception of any event that they play on the PGA Tour, I'm just going to shrug my shoulders. I don't collect DP World Tour stats. I don't collect live stats, anything like that. I focus strictly on the PGA Tour because that is what is in Fantasy National. And so if that means that you need to go somewhere else to get the information that you're interested in, by all means. I would rather be upfront and honest with you from the get-go in that regard, as opposed to trying to bullshit my way through an answer for you. So anything that I give in terms of DP World Tour players is going to be extremely surface level. And again, that is just me being fully transparent with you as the viewer. That way, if you are solely focused on DP or trying to get DP World Tour information, I won't be the person to go to this week. I just won't. Broke even at Deere. I'll take that as a win. Was overexposed on Ben Griffin. The Mad Scientist play. Again, just because I don't remember seeing you all last week. I'll just take a look at. I'll just give you a quick look. That was last week's selection. You know, I picked Denny McCarthy, who played well. My big miss was Sammy Valimaki. But there was Brian Campbell, the Mad Scientist play. So I played him quite a bit. I played a bunch of Cameron Champ. I played a bunch of Kevin Roy. It was just a really, really good week for me. And I'm going to try to keep that momentum. I did have quite a bit of Ben Griffin. But considering his ownership came in at about 35%, I think I was right at, I'll say field average. I was right about at that in my exposure to him. So I was neither under or overexposed. But I was very overexposed on Kevin Roy and Cam Champ and Brian Campbell. Yes, that is, again, calls for a reason. I don't get a whole lot of things right, or I don't get it right all the time. But when I do, I try to make sure to highlight the good and the bad. It's just the way I am. And if you were to go back and take a look at the U.S. Open and the Travelers especially, you would see that it was not very good. So it was good to have a strong week. The first strong week I've had back from my 6-week hiatus. Know some good advice on a few DP World Tour players. I mean, I know some names when we get into Fantasy National. I mean, some of these names will, ring a bell, if you will. Like Richie Ramsey, I know has played quite a bit. Adrian Sadier, Aki Stridham. I know the names, but as far as the detailed statistics, I'm just going to shrug my shoulders. All right, let's take a quick look at this forecast, and then we'll start digging in to some more statistical dives of Renaissance Club. Thursday looks a little bit like a challenge. Probably pretty mild by Scotland's standards, with sustained winds in the low double digits, and then gusts into the 20s. Friday through Sunday looks extremely mild, extremely calm. So, like I was mentioning last night, even though we didn't look at the forecast, I made a casual mention that the first forecast of the week probably suggested that the Renaissance Club was not going to play too difficult. If this forecast indeed holds, I would expect the same. We are not going to be looking at and I'll just bring up the historic conditions. We're not going to be looking at a 2022 like Xander -7 win based on this forecast, in my opinion. Now Thursday looks like it'll be tough, but then Friday through Sunday looks great. No rain in the forecast either. So I don't know how firm or fast that the tournament organizers want the Renaissance Club, but it's going to be as firm and fast as they want it to be. And of course, we'll be on the lookout for possible wave advantages come Wednesday night, but right now it's just too far in advance for the super forecast. We might have Thursdays, but even so, I mean, you see it's really only until the afternoon. So we won't have much of a wave advantage to try to focus on until Wednesday night. It was very windy today. I'll predict a -13 wind. Do you know what the over-under in terms of winning score is set by the bookmakers? Because 13 seems kind of low, meaning if we take a look at, like, say 2023 and 2024, like Rory was at 15 under, Bobby Mack was at 18 under last week. I would tend to think it would be more on the Rory and Bobby Mack side of that score that you put out there retail. Again, other than Thursday, the Renaissance Club isn't all that difficult. It just isn't. 14 to 17 total birdies. Okay, I think it's going to be a little bit more than that, only because I think there might be some bogeys in there as well, Rosé, but I don't hate that total or like winning score. My guess right now, if I had to put it out there, I would say 16 under based on this kind of forecast here. But as we always do on a Wednesday night, that's the first thing we'll do is take a look at the extended forecast. But be mindful moving forward tonight, tomorrow, and into Wednesday if a wave advantage develops. It's just too far removed or we're too far away on Windfinder to tell at the moment. All right, so with that, we're going to take a look at a couple of different things here in Fantasy National. If the wind does indeed pick up, and it does look like it'll be a factor on Thursday, but in case the wind does pick up throughout the rest of the week, your top performers on moderate and windy conditions in the Scottish Open field are Scotty, Rory, Matt McNeely, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Sungjae, Sam Burns, Tommy Fleetwood, Daniel Berger, and Corey Connors. Again, this is on the PGA Tour. There are several players here from the DP World Tour that just have 0 rounds on the PGA Tour, so we don't know, or at least I won't know, their performance in the wind. But in terms of PGA Tour players, there's your top performers in terms of wind. The Renaissance Club, fairly long by links style courses, and I would be very hesitant to consider this a traditional links style course. The purists call this a heathland design because there's a few trees. It's not as exposed to the elements, if you will, so they call it a heathlands design. I'm going to be honest, I would consider this links in my very uneducated opinion. But one thing that we can do, I'm a little hesitant to go with easy, because even with calm winds last year, we still had a round of moderate, and then you had a couple of rounds of average and one round of difficult 2 years ago when Rory won. So I'm not as confident to use this easy relative to par filter. There's nothing to do with length. This is in between 72 and 7400. I believe it's at close to 7300. I could be wrong with that. Now this is a par 70, but it's not a traditional par 70. There are 3 par 5s and 5 par 3s, but that is something that I guess we could take a quick look at if you are so inclined to look at par 70 golf courses. On those par 70 design or par 70 courses, your top performers have been Scotty, Tommy, Sam Burns, Aaron Rye, who is a former champion here at the Renaissance Club. Just happens to be before 2022 when I started collecting the data. Rory, Bobby Mack, our defending champion, JJ Spawn, Xander, the winner in 2022, Colin, and Corey Connors. All right, everything else is going to be focused on the statistical dives, if you will. And I'm just being completely transparent here. We don't have a lot of data to go on. Yes, we have last year and Bobby Mack's win. But if you go back to 2023, we didn't get any strokes gained data there. All we got was, the performance on par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s. We didn't get any proximity or fairways and greens. And the same goes for 2022. No strokes gained. We did get the driving statistics like fairways, greens, and whatnot. Got the birdies and then got the par 3s, 4s, and 5s. So in terms of pure strokes gained, we're only looking at 1 year. It was last year. So that's not a great barometer, I don't think. But that is all we have to go on. Now, the fairways and greens, birdies and bogeys, 3s, 4s, and 5s will have 2 years of data. So it's a little bit better. But I'm just being upfront with you here on that. So we'll move to Microsoft Excel and the detailed data surrounding the Scottish Open and the Renaissance Club. Hopefully we are still live. I see my stream seems to be lagging a little bit based on the limited data. Maybe comp courses would help. There are so few comp courses, in my opinion, to the Scottish Open, especially here stateside. I could see the Travelers maybe, even though the Travelers is extremely short and generally pretty easy. It is very similar in regards to the grass type, the fescue rough. The fairways are generally pretty forgiving. I could see the Travelers being somewhat of a comparison. And then specifically putting, I would think that places like the Plantation course and the Caribbean courses would be good fits in terms of putting, because those greens are notoriously slow by PGA Tour standards. And the Renaissance Club and the Open Championship always has very slow greens, and they have to keep it that way just due to the wind that's generally prevalent. So while I don't have a strong comparison course in mind, those are the kinds of places I would be thinking about. With only 1 year of strokes gained data, we'll do what we can. Bobby Mack was pretty darn good ball striking last year, but you see, it was a lot about the putting for our top performers last year. And I do think that's going to play a pretty decent factor, because 3-putt avoidance is usually a strong indicator of performance on links and Open Championship style courses. So you see, like, the tee off the tee was 24%, but it still wasn't as much as the approach. So we might be doing some off the tee, particularly some distance, because the distance actually played quite a bit last year. And it was about PGA Tour average in 2022. But we're going to put quite a bit of factor into putting, specifically 3-putt avoidance. I'm not sure how to feel about around the green, and I mentioned this last night. These greens, while they are large, they're not necessarily easy to hit. Now, is that a product of the irons and wanting to emphasize the irons, or are players just generally going to miss greens a bunch, and around the green is going to matter no matter who you are? Think kind of like the U.S. Open and the Masters and things like that. Around the green is always a big deal at those places because they're majors and they're very difficult. I don't know how to think about it. I really don't. I don't know if the around the green is going to play a big factor for everyone, or if it mattered for some of these players because their irons weren't strong. We're definitely going to look at these two. We might take a look at this and then putting. And in fact, before I go too much further, let's go ahead and go to last year's leaderboard. And while like Sungjae and Rory were very good around the green, Aaron Rai was very good around the green, there isn't a whole lot to be gained here. Like if we sort on around the green, like the top around the green player missed the cut. Granted, you can expect that because he didn't hit his irons very well and he didn't putt for worth a damn. You had 3 top 5s here very high. So you had a 6.6 in the around the green, a 6.5, but you had a lot more high performance, including our winner in off the tee. The only miscut was Keith Mitchell, and that's what Keith Mitchell does because he doesn't make putts. I'm more inclined to think we're going to be wanting to look more in the off the tee than the around the green. So that I am generally in agreement with you there, Rose. Considering Bobby Mack was, not terrible, but he was just slightly above field average. We had a couple of players pretty strong in around the green, but most of these top 10 to top 15 guys were pretty darn strong in terms of off the tee. So I'm thinking that's where I'm going this week. Fortunately, we have some time to think about it. So we might look at a little bit of around the green, but I don't know how much. Moving to fairways and greens, I mentioned how distant. I do think 5 par 5s off the tee. There are only 3 par 5s. Only 3. There are 5 par 3s. This is a par 70 retail. This is a par 70. Not a traditional one, but it is a par 70. 5 par 3s and 3 par 5s. So, and what I will say is those par 5s aren't really reachable unless under the best of circumstances. One is 600 yards. The others are well into the 570s and generally play into the wind from my understanding. So there's a whole lot of having to make those true 3-shot holes. Having said that, the bigger hitters like Rory and all that will probably be able to attack them in 2 as long as they find the fairway. So that's another reason why I'm thinking more so off the tee. And I do think distance will help. The greens have been very, very consistent, 3.35, 3.34, and they've been a decent, factor more so than the average full field course. So much like I did with the John Deere, and I generally tend to default to this, I might be looking at some good drives gained because I don't think the rough is penal, unlike most Open Championship style courses. I don't think the rough at the Renaissance Club is very penal. It's more so you have to avoid the pot bunkers littered throughout the course and the fairway. So I'm thinking if we take a look at good drives gained, players are hitting fairways or they are hitting the green from the rough, I think that's probably going to do us some good this week. We might take a slight look in distance considering some of these former champions like Xander, like Rory. Bobby Mack moves it. We saw Nicholas Norgard being a top 15 last year. He's one of the longer hitters on tour. I think that's probably going to serve us well, but I'm probably going to be going with good drives gained. Going to scoring, Bobby Mack was accurate in making long putts. That explains this with the putting, even though it says minus 1.6. Bobby Mack was, I think, +4 or something like that in terms of strokes gained, 4.1. So, and just very quickly, because you mentioned it, he was a 3.1 in terms of fairways. He wasn't the most in terms of fairway finding like Ben Coles and Francesco Molinari, but in a general sense, Rose, yes, he was pretty darn accurate off the tee, even if he did sacrifice a little bit of distance. You see Rory, 76 versus a 13. He's given up quite a bit of distance there. I remember some of the Bobby Mack last year. I more so remember hitting the outright. That's what I remember last year. So with him making that putt on 18 on Sunday, I thoroughly enjoyed that tournament, because if he didn't make that putt, I don't think I would have as fond of memories. He was very dialed with the irons. You are right. I mean, gaining 5.7. It wasn't the leader, but by goodness, he was up there. He was very, very good with his irons last year. So we definitely don't want to ignore that. Going back to Excel, looking at scoring, I think this is a little bit of an overreaction from 2022, just to be completely honest with you. You see the birdies have steadily gained over the 3 years. Now, bogeys were something last year, but they were very heightened in 2021 in 2022 because of how difficult it was. So I'm more so thinking that we're going to be wanting to looking at birdies gained. We might look at birdies or better if we think that forecast is going to hold and it's going to be as easy as I think it's going to be. But we'll have to see. And then moving into, the real nitty-gritty, looking at these par 3s, 4s, and 5s, you see these par 3s, there are a good spread here of lengths of par 3s. So no real length of par 3 generates the majority of the strokes gained. So anything in par 3s, we're going to look at all. But we are going to look at all par 3s because they are 21.5% more important than the average full field course. There are 5 par 3s here, so they are going to have some weight. I don't know how much I'm going to want to put in the mixed condition model, but we definitely don't want to ignore par 3s. Moving to par 4s, pretty simple. More than, probably 55 to 60% of the strokes gained in par 3s fall 450 to 500. It is more than double any other range. So while the par 4s do carry a decent amount of weight, we're going to mainly look at 450 to 500 because this is where the strokes gained are coming from in terms of par 4s. And then par 5s, surprisingly, even though there's only one par 5 measuring 600 to 650, it's been the leader 2 of the 3 years. Now, last year, it was heavily the 550 to 600. So I don't like seeing that, 1 year was heavily this, 1 year was heavy that. I don't know. I don't know how to think about that. We might look at just these 2 ranges in general. And then proximity, it's really tough. Proximity is pretty finicky as it is. And at least last year it was in the 150 to 200 range. But I'm not very confident in that, considering we didn't get any of 2023 proximity. 2022 we didn't get any strokes gained data, so I don't know how to feel about the proximity stuff there. If you have strong feeling on something, then we can take a look at it when we get to that page view in Fantasy National. I just don't know where I would go. It seems like statistically we want to look here, but I'm just not terribly confident with it. So there is a deep statistical look into what data we do have for the Renaissance Club in the past 3 years. I understand the Scottish Open has been played there for the past 6 or so years. I'm only going back to 2022 because that's the time frame of the DP World Tour and PGA Tour Alliance, where a lot of the PGA Tour players go over there and play the Scottish, and some of the DP World Tour guys come and play the alternate field event this week in what used to be Nicholasville. Now it's in Louisville. So anyway, with that, now that we've taken a look at the data, at least the data we can look at regarding the Renaissance Club, let's take a look at some of the players in the field this week who seem to fit those statistics that we've been looking at. I'm going to start with off the tee. And again, I'm only basing this on the forecast. But if that forecast does indeed hold, Thursday's going to be pretty challenging. And I think Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are going to be pretty darn easy if the winds are as calm as that forecast suggests. So I'm going to use the easy relative to par filter. Your top performers in rounds that are easy off the tee: Rory, Luke Clanton, Kevin Yu, Scotty Scheffler, Alejandro Tosti, Aldrich Potgieter, Morikawa, Sam Stevens, Ludwig, and Taylor Pendrith are your top 10 in terms of off the tee when rounds are easy. Yeah, that's really the only kind of filter I want to use there, because fairways, they've been difficult, especially if the wind's up. They can be easy for players clubbing down. So I'm kind of just going with this easy relative par for the off the tee for this week. Your top iron players, so long as it's been 2025 in the field this week. And again, reminder that this is just PGA Tour. I don't collect DP World Tour statistics. But your top performers in approach in the past 36 rounds: Scotty, Victor, Sepp Straka, Henrik Norlander, Colin Morikawa, Bud Cauley, Daniel Berger, Victor Paris, Corey Connors, and Sami Välimäki are your top 10 in terms of approach. Before I forget, Retail, you asked about, let's see, Marco Pingue and Daniel Brown. So we'll do that. Daniel Brown was, I believe, in the lead for this tournament or the Open Championship last year or 2 years ago. It must have been last year's Open. He played really, really well. You see the Scottish, he made the cut, but wasn't terribly impressive. And then the Barbasol, what used to be, or the ISCO used to be at Keene Trace, that's a very, very easy tournament, easy course. He lit it up and finished top 10. So on this limited set of data, he's probably going to rise, considering he putts very well. He probably doesn't have too bad of metrics in terms of 3-putt avoidance. He's probably going to rise for me. Although the one thing is, when it's easy, he hadn't been the best. Because I imagine last year's Open was considered difficult. Yeah. And then last year's Scottish was generally pretty easy. So Daniel Brown is one DP World Tour player that I'm aware of. I know his name. I've heard of him, all that stuff. He, of the players in the DP World Tour, I would be able to say with the most minimal of confidence that, yeah, depending on his price, I don't hate it. Retail. As far as Pingue, I'm going to be honest, I don't know anything about him. He did top 25 of the PGA this year. He's played in a couple Opens, missed the cut in them, and played in last year's ISCO at Keene Trace and was really bad, at least with the irons. So I'm going to tell you now, he's going to fall drastically in my mixed condition model. But I just because he played poorly at the ISCO doesn't mean he's not worth a look. I just don't know anything. I don't know enough about him. I feel more confident in slightly recommending Daniel Brown over the absolute no idea on Marco Pingay. And then is Harris English a good scrambler for links courses? You would have to think so. We'll take a quick look at Harris English, and we'll take a look at, like, say, the Open Championship. First, we'll take a look at the Scottish. He is 2 for 2 at the Scottish, 34th and 42nd. Not a whole lot of high-level success, but he is 2 for 2. He generally keeps it in front of him, doesn't hit it wayward. If we take a look at his Open Championship performance, pretty poor. Yeah, I mean, he does have a top 15 way back in 2013, but been pretty poor lately. So, of those three that you mentioned, retail, my lean would be Daniel Brown, only because I know he has played the Open well. He made the cut at the Renaissance Club last year. Seems to be a good putter, which is I'm putting a decent amount of weight into. That would be my recommendation of those three, but I can't give you a whole lot of confidence in Daniel Brown. It does seem like I don't have any confidence in Harris English, is what I can tell you on that. We'll hit around the green just very, very casually here, because I don't know how much I'm going to use, if any, in the final mixed condition model. So your top around the green players in 2025: Sungjae, Matt Wallace, Tommy, Matteo Montecero, Andrew Putnam, Alejandro Tosti, Sam Stevens, Davis Riley, Ryan Gerard, and Scotty. And then finally, what we're going to do, or at least what I did last night for putting, I'm going to go all the way back to 2022, but I am going to use the filter Velcro, the slowest of slow greens, because these greens are going to be slow. And the courses that comprise this subset of data with Velcro greens are generally these Caribbean courses on the PGA Tour. Cocoa Beach, host of the Puerto Rico Open. Corrales, host of the Corrales. El Camaleon, El Cardinal, both in Mexico. Vedanta in Mexico. Somehow TPC Summerlin gets in here. That's the host of the Shriners in the fall. Plantation course. What most of these courses, I mean, yes, well, there are a few exceptions like San Antonio, like Summerlin, but the majority of these courses, even Pebble Beach, what they all have in common is that they're coastal. They're coastal, and at least for the PGA Tour, a majority of these are Caribbean. So there is some likeness there in terms of putting, and that's why I mentioned at the onset, if you're looking for putting, I would look to these style of tournaments just because of the slowness of the greens. Your top putters on slow greens, very, very slow greens: Denny McCarthy, Taylor Pendrith, Sungjae, Nico Echeverria, Andrew Putnam, Adam Scott, Justin Rose, Jacob Bridgman, Thomas Dietrich, and Taylor Moore. I'm skipping Griot and Shank. They are alternates as of this moment. That's why they are starred. So I would don't be surprised when these players rise a decent amount, considering I'm going to put a pretty good amount of weight into putting, and I'm probably going to have to use the Velcro speed filter because these greens are fescue, technically. They're not bent, they're not Bermuda, they're obviously not Bermuda, that's a Caribbean style thing. They're not POA, they are deemed fescue. That is not a option in terms of filter. What the hell is this 73 down here? Okay, that must be an input error on Fantasy National's part. Curiosity. Okay, so there's a look at the strokes gained for the for the Scottish Open. We'll take a look at fairways and greens very quickly. I do want to take a look at distance just very quickly, and it'll make sense why when we go back to Microsoft Excel. But when rounds are easy relative to par, your top distance players in the field this week: Jake Knapp, Potgieter, Jesper Svensson, Norgard, Chris Goddard, Nikolai Højgaard, Max Graziman, Rory, Rasmus Højgaard, and Gary Woodland. Just out of curiosity, where is Bobby Mack in this? 123rd in terms of distance when it's easy. Interesting. Okay. Granted, that is this year, so take that for what you will. If we take a look at good drives gained, your top good drives gained performers when rounds are easy relative to par: Scotty, Daniel Berger, Andrew Putnam, Aaron Rai, Victor Perry, Colin Morikawa, Joel Damon, Kevin Yu. There's Bobby Mack, Harris English, so maybe something there retail, and then Nick Taylor are your top 11. You see most of these players in terms of top performance in good drives, they are highly, highly focused in the fairways. Having said that, Scotty, solid in both, and Kevin Yu is actually pretty elite in both. 15th and 18th in terms of distance and fairways. So, pretty solid there. If you're wanting to look at a lot of off the tee, specifically Rosé, Kevin Yu might be somebody to take a look at. We're going to go to scoring. I'm going to keep this easy relative to par filter, again, only because of that forecast that we looked at the beginning of the show. Kevin Yu popping a ton for me in my model. He generally pops for me because I don't have a lot of focus in putting most of the time. Having said that, with me putting a lot of focus into putting, I'm going to be a little bit more wary. I know he's been playing better lately, and the putter is real hot right now. So he might not fall as much as I'm thinking, but like other than, the past two tournaments, the irons had been fairly hit and miss. So long as Kevin Yu's putter remains hot, I think it's a worthwhile investment. Because generally, you see here, he is traditionally not a very good putter. So he's either on a hot streak right now, or he has changed something. You say no, you. I don't inherently hate that take. But Kevin Yu is somebody that I have had my eye on, particularly regarding year-long stuff for a while now. So I have to be very transparent in that Kevin Yu might be a pet player for me. But as long as I'm aware of that and you all are aware of that, then you can adjust accordingly. All right, let's take a look at some scoring. I don't think we're going to go with opportunities gained, considering the size of these greens, how difficult it is to hit these greens. Let's just take a look at birdies or better. And we're going to look at birdies or better because we do have a drivable par 4 that could yield a few eagles, even though the longest par 5 on the front, or even though it is the longest par 5 on the course, it does yield the most eagles at 600 yards and a little bit more than a 2% eagle rate. That's not incredibly high, but eagles do happen. We've also got a 1.5 and a 1.5. So eagles could happen. They don't happen often, but they could happen. So your top birdies or better gained players when rounds have been easy this year: Scotty, Kevin Yu, Brian Campbell, Sepp Straka, Justin Thomas, Siwoo, Jake Knapp, Mav McNeely, Rasmus Nergard Peterson, somebody who I didn't get much right for the U.S. Open, but he was my mad scientist play for the U.S. Open, finishing in the top 12. So somebody else that I've been really keeping my eye on for a little bit now. And finally, Nicholas Norgard. Rasmus Nergaard Peterson is somebody to really, really keep an eye on. Despite the fact he missed the cut at the PGA, he's got the skill set, or at least when I highlighted him for the U.S. Open, he had the skill set that I was very, very much wanting. Very good ball striker, seemingly. Again, he's had very limited events on the PGA Tour. He's mostly DP World Tour, but in his events on the PGA Tour, he's been a very good ball striker. He's been pretty darn good around the green. He's just been Keith Mitchell or Luke List on the greens. He hasn't made a damn thing. And that was my thing at the U.S. Open. I was like, as long as he makes one putt and keeps the ball striking going, I liked that skill set. So it's another thing that I'll probably emphasize this week. Like, Rasmus Nergaard Peterson could be something to really to look at, especially if you're focused on more of the ball striking. Now, I would not be surprised if he falls, considering how poorly he is putt, but I do want to make that I want to bring that to your all's attention in terms of Rasmus Nergaard Peterson. All right, there's your top birdies or better gained players. Let's move to par threes. We'll go threes, fours, and fives just really quickly, and then we'll finish off with some of the research that I didn't post to social media, only because there's 3 years and there's not a whole lot of data, but I'll show you with what I can that kind of stood out to me. Top par three performers. Again, we're just looking at total par threes here. Top par three performers in the field this week: Colin Morikawa, Sepp Straka, Nico Echeverria, Denny McCarthy, Matt McCarty, Scotty Scheffler, Thorbjorn Olesen, Ryo Hitsatsune, Matty Schmid, and Rory. Your top 10 in terms of par three performance. Skipping Chan Kim, he is an alternate as of the moment. Moving to par fours, again, all of the par four, 55 to 60% of the strokes gained came between 450 and 500. So, best performers at that length: Scotty, Nick Taylor, Sam Burns, Corey Connors, Alex Smalley, Ludwig, Justin Thomas, Denny McCarthy, Michael Kim, and JJ Spawn. And then lastly, we'll take a look at par 5 scoring. I'm going to sort on the 550 to 600, but we're kind of looking at both of these because we've got 600, but it could fall below the 600. It could go above 600. The other two, 594, could very easily go above 600 when they move tees and pins around. 576 pretty well locked in to the 550 to 600 range. So we're kind of right on the cusp there of this 550 to 600. So we're going to look at both of these. Somebody like Davis Riley, first and ninth in the two most important lengths. Scotty, fourth and first. Rory, sixth and 16th. I mean, Victor and Max Grazerman deserve honorable mentions. Jesper Svensson, 10th and 2nd. Xander, 11th and 5th. Adam Scott, honorable mention. Harris English. So maybe something more to look at there, retail, considering he was top 10 in good drives gained, and he is very high or highly statted in terms of these par fives. Interesting. Andrew Novak. Nicholas Norgard has popped quite a bit tonight. He's good at these length of par fives. I mean, he's just good in par fives in general. Keith Mitchell. Olesen to a little bit lesser of an extent. So there's a look at some of your top par 5 performers at the length of par 5s at the Renaissance Club. Okay, we're going to finish the show off with going back to Microsoft Excel. Normally, I go through the early look file, but you can see because of the lack, can I look at Nat? Sure, I can do that. Let's do that just very, very quickly. Jake Knapp, what exactly are you wanting to look at retail in terms of Jake Knapp? I mean, he's been solid. He was somebody that I was very, very high on in the John Deere he played okay. I mean, top 25 is nothing to scoff at. I was a little disappointed in how he closed either Saturday or Sunday. But again, top 25 is a fair performance. He was popping on that last screen pretty decent. Oh, and the par fives. He generally takes advantage of par fives. Absolutely. He didn't do the best at that length at the John Deere, but I mean, you see, traditionally, he's been pretty darn good on par fives. So I just don't know how much par fives are really going to matter this week. Yes, there are 3 of them. But to Rosé's point, par 3 is the key this week. Par 5s are not giving up eagles. I would tend to agree. Although if the wind is down, those par 5s could be more attackable in 2. Could be. In fact, if we sort on all par 5s, I mean, there's Jake Knapp there. He's 7th in total par 5s retail, but he's kind of more middling. That's not fair to Jake Knapp. He's good at these 2 lengths. 550 to 600, 600 to 650. But you see, he does most of his damage on shorter par 5s. And the par 5s here aren't short. They're not under 550 yards. So I might not be as high on Jake Knapp on the par 5s, but he's good. I mean, he's not elite like a Scotty, 4th and 1st. He's not elite like a Rory, 6th or 16th. Xander, 11th and 5th. But, you know, he's good. So I don't have anything wrong with Jake Knapp specifically on the par 5s. Now, his putter, I'm not terribly familiar with how his putter has been lately. Seems like it's been good. He generally plays his best when it's easy. I tend to agree with you, Rosé, but I'm basing this on that forecast. And that forecast, if that forecast is indeed true and holds, it's going to play much more like a PGA course than you think. Than what you would normally think of a Scottish or a links style course. Because the wind is the only defense this course really has, other than like the contouring of the greens. So I don't hate Jake Knapp this week. I'm a little concerned he might be a little popular. I don't know what kind of fun wager you're thinking of, but we can have a friendly a friendly tally on it. I'm not opposed to having some running tallies with members. I know Darnell likes to bet me a lot. We've made so many, we're probably just even at this point. I don't even know. What are you trying to say, Rosé, in terms of the par 5s not mattering? Because that it hinges on that. I remember, of course, they also... Well, that is one thing that Gabe, in his article, was very... he eloquently put, better than I can, but the summary is there are so many tee boxes around the Renaissance Club, or the Renaissance Club, that they have many, many options on how they can set up the course. So putting seemed to be the key last year to winning. It was. Absolutely was, retail. Especially for your top, say, like 15. Only one player negative in terms of putting. And some of these numbers are pretty darn big. Par 5s are not giving up eagle this week no matter what. I would venture to say that we would get... I'd say we'd get... I'll set the over-under at 7.5, and I'll put over. We get over 7.5 eagles on par 5s this week. I think I'm confident with that. Because if you look, like par 5s, like Langosque played them very well. Adam Scott played them very well. If we go to like eagles, Like, there were eagles to be had. Scottish Open. Like, see, like Longoska, just in round 1 last year, he had an eagle. Eagle there. Like, there will be a few eagles throughout this week, especially if that forecast holds. Now, if the wind that is forecasted on Thursday is persistent throughout the week, then I'm much more in agreement with you, in the sense that it'll be much more difficult. But this par 5 in particular, I remember playing downwind, and there were a few eagles. So, what if you want to take a think on it, Rose, and come up with something? If Xander finishes here, well, again, Xander finished -4, but that was because it was cold, it was rainy, and it was extremely windy. That is not what the forecast holds for right now. These conditions here for Xander in 2022 were horrendous. They were true Opens Championship style conditions. We have not had that the past couple of years. That's all right, retail. I play plenty of games too, in my quote unquote free time. So nothing to apologize there. All right, we're getting over on time, and I do want to show you a little bit of the research, or even though I didn't post it, par 5s would help with that. Again, I think we're in agreement. I'm just putting more emphasis into the forecast right now, Rose, and I could change my tune if that forecast changes. But based on the forecast that is there right now, I think it's going to play a little bit easier than what you're thinking, at least for like eagles and scoring. Normally, I go through what I call the early look file. There's not a lot to do here because we only have 1 year of strokes gained data from last year. A lot of these players are going to have zeros, like Johnny Vegas has zeros across the board, even though he made the cut his one try, because we didn't get the strokes gained data. So instead, let's just go ahead and go into the research that I would have posted, but I ended up not doing because I didn't feel confident in limiting the field based on what I saw. So if we take a look at the winner matrix, performance of these champions leading up to their win at the Scottish Open, Rory didn't play it in 2022 and then wins. Of course, Xander, first year I'm collecting data. Bobby Mack had some success, so we don't have a lot to go off here. If this year's winner has some success at the Renaissance Club, then there's something to go off of. But as of right now, all we have is 1 year where the player didn't play the year before, and one guy who missed the cut, then finished second, and then wins. So we don't have a lot to go on there. As far as recent performance, Bobby Mack actually missed the cut before the win, but all 3 of them gained off the tee. So that is something. In their most recent event, all 3 gained off the tee. All 3 were higher than the field average in distance. And they had some pretty darn good form leading into the win at the Renaissance Club. Like, take a look at Bobby Mack. He wins the RBC Canadian Open, but he had another top 10, another top 15, and another top 20. So he had 2 top 10s and 3 top 15s since the Masters. Since the Masters of that year. Rory, 5 top 10s since the Masters of that year. Xander won the Travelers, comes over, wins the Scottish. But he also had another top 5 and 2 more top 15s at the U.S. Open and the PGA. So all 3 of these champions were in extreme recent form. We're talking multiple top 10s, multiple more top 15s. So I didn't feel comfortable in trying to narrow down the field based on that. But that would be one criteria that I would do, is since the Masters of this year, make sure they have at least 2 top 10s and probably 3 or 4 top 15s. That's one, eliminating factor. Another one, like I said, they gained off the tee in their most recent event. They gained in driving distance. They gained in good drives gained. So they were performing well off the tee. These champions were. Much to what you were saying earlier, Rosé, they had all gained on par 3s their most recent event. So they were in good par 3 form coming in. So those were some of the factors that stood out to me. I didn't feel comfortable because it didn't narrow down a whole lot of the field, not to the level that I like. I think it was something like 20 to 25 people. So just be aware of that for especially any win wagers that you're making. Multiple top 10s and top 15s since the Masters this year, gained off the tee, probably good in distance, and played the par 3s well their most recent event. But anyway, that's what I have in terms of a data dive show. Very, very appreciative. It was fun interacting with you all. Thanks to Retail and Rosé for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, trying to give you a statistician's view of what he sees to help us win some money in the process. Last week was one of my best weeks in a long, long time. I'm going to try to keep the momentum going. A reminder, a scheduling reminder, there is an alternate field tournament this week. Yes, the Scottish Open is the main event, but there is a tournament at Hurstbourne Country Club in Louisville, Kentucky. So tomorrow night, normally I'm not live on Tuesday evenings. Tomorrow night, I will have the research, the data, and the DFS all in one show for the ISCO Championship. So if you have any interest in wagers or DFS for the alternate field event, I suggest you check out tomorrow night's show. I'll have all 3 of those crammed into one evening. But thanks again for all the support. Very much appreciated. For all the wagers you've made so far this week for the Scottish Open, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Scottish Open, and until I see you tomorrow night for the ISCO Championship full show, may all your bets be profitable.